Hi, I'm Eric Ostro, host of Live at the Lortel. For Season 4, we continue our focus on art and activism. Why do off-Broadway artists uplift certain causes, and how do those causes make them the artists they are today? And while we gather virtually, we'd like to recognize that we occupy land stolen from Indigenous people. Join us in acknowledging this history and consider our role in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Ostro. I'm one of the co-hosts of Live at the Lortel. I'm so happy to have you here. I'd like to explain a little bit about myself. I am a Caucasian male. I'm wearing a black sweater with brown hair. Behind me is a couch with kind of crazy wallpaper. And my pronouns are his and him. I'd like to bring my co-host on for the evening, Joy D. Michelle. Joy.
Hello, love. How are you?
Hello, my love. How are you?
I am fantastic.
It is so good to see you, and you look ravishing.
Thank you. Good to see you too. Our last gathering of the year.
Yes, it's exciting.
So, I am Joy D. Michelle. My pronouns are my pronouns are, and I answer to she, her, and y'all. And I am brown skin African American woman with naturally curly, kinky hair, and a black turtleneck.
And you look beautiful. I'm so excited about our guest this evening. Shuler Hensley is a multi-award-winning star of film, television, who is currently starring on Broadway in the hit musical The Music Man. Broadway credits include Oklahoma, for which he won the Tony Award, The Ferryman, and many others. He starred in numerous films and TV shows, and tonight we look forward to talking with him about some of his off-Broadway credits too, including The Whale, which he won the Lucille Lortel Award, and Sweet Charity, a Lortel nomination. He is currently the Associate Artistic Director at City Springs Theater Company, where the Shuler Awards were started, and he's on the founding advisory board for the new musical theater program at the Manhattan School of Music. Please welcome the very talented Shuler Hensley. Welcome.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Shuler Hensley. I'm the guest. My pronouns are he, him. I'm 6'3". I'm a very large man, and unfortunately, right now, I have very long, unruly, curly hair for the show I'm doing, Music Man. So I'm wearing a hat that says Iowa on it, which is sort of the theme of our show. But I'm super excited to be with you guys.
Which is perfect. We are super excited to have you here. Shuler, I have to get out of the way. I'm a very big fan. I've seen almost all of your work, especially in New York, and I just think you are an extraordinary artist. And I'm so glad that we have you to end our year before we go into the next. You're a perfect guest for the last one of the year.
It is such an honor to end the year. I'm telling you, it's been quite a year for all of us, I'm sure.
Yes, I know. Well, let's start with talking about it. Let's talk about. I like to start by talking about what you're doing currently. With your triumph in The Music Man, and what was that like, to come back? I mean, The Music Man was supposed to open so many years ago, and they kept pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back, or pushing it forward, excuse me.
Right.
Pushing it forward. But what was that experience like?
Well, it's like no other experience you've had. I recently found my original contract, which was dated, I think it was dated January 2019. So, and we were all like, yay! And then all of this craziness hit. But it's just one of those productions where you have 5 or 6 Tony Award winners in the cast. You have 21 Broadway debuts in the cast. The children range from age 8 to 22. They're all world-class dancers. You've got a full, rich orchestra with Jonathan Tunick orchestrations. Jerry Zaks is helming us as our director. Warren Carlisle's choreography. So it's everything you would want in a musical to begin with, and then you add the fact that it's The Music Man, which is one of those quintessential American musicals that everyone's familiar with. So it's sort of created a perfect welcome back to Broadway for not only us as the cast, but for people who were, a little nervous about getting back into live theaters. But as soon as the overture starts and you're familiar with the music and the story, I think there's just a big sense of breathing out together as a community in the theater. That's just magic, and it's been that way for a year now. So we've been at it for almost exactly a year, and every night it's like a rock concert in terms of appreciation from the audience, and getting to work with my buddy Hugh and Sutton, and I've done a number of shows with both of them, but this has been really special.
What is that's my next question. I mean, you and Hugh go back. I mean, you've done so many films with him. You've done stage work with him. What is that relationship like? The friendship, you guys probably speak a language that no one else does.
Yeah, I mean, we know each other. I actually went with Hugh to his first Wolverine audition. And he did not get the role originally. It's one of those great stories, like Tom Selleck was supposed to be the original not Han Solo, but Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Really?
And we can't imagine anyone else doing it, but we were in London together. Hugh and I first met in the basement rehearsal room at the National Theatre in London to start Oklahoma. And he had just come from Australia I believe he was in Beauty and the Beast. So he was sort of known as a musical theater kid in Australia, but that was just the start of everything. And I have to say, this sounds corny, but he's not changed at all through all of this. He's one of the kindest, most giving human beings, regardless of his talent as an actor. He's just a good human being. And I think that's what's made him so beloved by so many people in the theater and in the film world, that he's just one of those guys that you're like, oh, please let him be as nice as he looks and seems to be. And he is. And likewise, Sutton. I mean, you couldn't ask for two better leads in a show to set by example, especially when you're dealing with a large number of children in the show
and new people and Broadway debuts.
Yes, I mean, it's their first experience on a Broadway stage, and I gotta say, this has probably ruined it for them for the rest of their lives, because it doesn't get any better than this. But I mean, they're loving it, but it's extraordinary. So yeah, I've known Hugh. I think we tried to count the number of years. I think it was 97 that we first met, the end of 97.
Wow.
So it's been a while. And I try to do any excuse I have to work with him. I'll do it, just because he's not only a good person, but we work well. I know his language as an actor, and we just have fun. And it comes down, I think, my mom was a ballet director, and I was sort of raised in the theater. And as a kid, I always thought, I want to do this because it's fun. And as a baseline thing, I enjoy doing this. And I think over the years, we tend to maybe lose sight of that. But once I'm back on stage with somebody like you, it immediately comes back why we got into this in the first place. And it's just fun and exciting and a chance to share with people.
That's
guys,
wonderful and very generous of you to say. In talking about leading a cast of people and being the head of that, you've been in that position many, many times. And with the Phantom, you were in that position. What can you talk about the importance of the responsibility of what that means and what that feels like and looks like to lead a cast and know that you kind of set the temperature of the room?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think what sets up the magic is to create a community of trust. I mean, trust is and the way you do that is I think you try to be as real off stage, and so that there's not a real separation between off stage and on stage, so that when you go on with somebody, you know that person, you trust that person. I think that's the responsibility, is to create a safe, creative environment to say, you know what, you have the right, and we're going to honor your creative spark, and we're going to support. Support is huge. And I feel like that's not necessarily I feel like it's a responsibility for those who are more seasoned to help create that, but also create an environment where there is no hierarchy, but it's like I am beneath no one and superior to no one. That's what I always try to remember hearing, and I think it makes magic when people believe that.
Speaking of Phantom in Germany, which was going to be a question later on, how did that come about? And did you speak German before you took the role? I mean,
I came out of opera. I studied at the Manhattan School of Music. So there were a number of operas that I had performed prior to that in German. So it was an interesting production, because there were a lot of people from America that went to Hamburg who were opera singers. So if you weren't fluent in German, you were very familiar with the pronunciation, and it was fairly easy to learn. So that was my background in it. And once I was there, just being exposed to the German language, 24/7. Although I must say, the Germans were great in that they were so intent on learning English. So it was kind of a fight. Which language are we going to speak? And I'm trying so hard to speak German, and they're like, no, let me try this. But that's how I got involved in it. And it felt much more like an opera there because of the size of the orchestra, the size of the theater, the elaborateness of the cast. It was a massive cast. So it was very familiar to me.
Did you love, playing in such an enormous theater and playing it is an opera, especially now in German. Did they bring some more Americans over, or was it strictly I know they brought some, but your Christine and your all the other leading players, were they German actors?
The Christine, there were a couple of Christines. There was an American Christine and a German Christine. There was a German Phantom, and there were two American Phantoms. So it was a nice cross-section of cast, even down to the dancers were all from like London. Not all of them, but there was a huge cross section. And that's actually how my wife is British. So we had just gotten married. And that's while I was in Germany, it was very easy to get to London to audition for things. And that was sort of my trajectory into the London aspect of Oklahoma. I had found out while I was performing in Germany that they were going to do a production of that at the National. So it was just sort of a fortuitous route. And I mean, I work with a lot of kids in high school who are thinking about musical theater or college. And I always say, and it comes down to what my mom used to tell me, is you really just need to be not only be kind to people, but network. Always take an interest in what other people are doing within the business, because you just never know when that's going to come back. And I'm a perfect example of that, being in Germany, but having friends I made in London there who told me about the audition in London for Oklahoma. So it's a very interesting thing through networking and you know, making friends in this business, that it can only help you.
Yeah, and I think that people would be very interested in that story of, you know, someone telling you about, what was that, 97 when you
Yes, it
were
was
doing you auditioned for Oklahoma that they were doing at the National, right?
right. So my wife was British, and we got married, but we met in New York. We got married the next day. We went to the Summer Olympic Games in Atlanta, because I'm from Atlanta, and that was '96. So the next day, after I watched Michael Johnson run the quarterfinals in track and field, we got on a plane to go to Hamburg for Phantom. And then once my Phantom contract was nearing an end, I went to England with my wife to visit her family, but also had heard about the Oklahoma, and her brother actually was a theater manager who said, "Oh, I know an agent in London." And you know, I had always heard, well, you need an agent to get into these auditions. So I met with him and I said, "Look, I'm perfect for this. Just, you know, represent me for this one audition." And they were fine with that. And um, then I met Susan Stroman and Trevor Nunn in the basement rehearsal room at the National for the audition. And
You went in and blew them away. I mean, obviously you got the role, you won the Olivier Award, but working with Stroman and working with that incredible team. I mean,
yes.
what was for our young people out there that go into auditions and want to know what is your advice about auditioning, and what was that audition like?
Well, the audition was, I honestly, I think I learned more about how to be a really successful director from Trevor Nunn. And he used to tell me that, let's say 80% of great directing is casting. And that you don't, once you get the right people in the roles, you direct them towards something, but you don't tell them necessarily how to get there. And that's what that whole experience was like. I never felt like, when I went into the room, that I think often we do as young artists, we think, what do they want? What do they want? I need to find out what they want. And it's not that. It's, what can I give them? What do I have to offer them? And on the other side of the table, having directed and being a artistic director myself, I'm over there going, show me something, show me something. I don't know what I want. And I think I think that's a huge lesson to learn, that both sides of the table are just wanting something they're not expecting, or they just want you to bring what makes you you. And
The answer to what they need.
Yeah, and Trevor, and both Trevor and Susan Stroman are geniuses at making people feel comfortable in the audition. comfortable to the point that you feel comfortable enough to create something unique. And that's the secret, that if you can create an environment. And I remember Trevor would do the smokehouse scene with me. He actually brought me to the other side of the rehearsal room and turned me around away from the audition table. So it was just him and me. And it was as intimate as we are right now talking, just about the scene. And
wow.
Knowing that that's really where you find out who people are is when you give them a safe environment to sort of explore and just be those people.
And feel comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice for those that are performing, those that are wanting to direct. Now, let's go back to when you were talking about networking. So for those people who are going, okay, they're taking notes. They're going, okay, surprise them, bring myself into the room. Now, network. For those people who feel nervous or feel like, what do they call the imposter syndrome and all that stuff, what advice do you have for them when they step into the space and they need to be talking to folks?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that I think you can learn, and you only learn by doing it, and you learn by doing it and failing. Failing is a huge teacher, and especially in this business. And failing, I mean by not getting the role. I mean, everyone thinks, "Oh, I didn't get it. I failed." And I'm using failing in quotes because it's not failing. It's learning, and that's part of networking too. But it's how you allow yourself to, if you could go into an audition and you say, I have one thing I want to do in that audition, and I'm going to do it for me. And if I do that, it's good enough. And it's to maybe, like for Judd, it may be for me to give them a sense of somebody who is deeply emotionally hurt or embarrassed. Embarrassment is any kind of descriptive word, and then allow yourself to truly give an honest thing of that one moment. It reads, and then you as an actor don't have to go, oh, I have to manipulate this. Oh, here comes that high note at this. If you keep things simple, it sort of snowball affects itself. Because I think, for me anyway, I get in trouble when I overthink things. So I think that's a huge part of it. And regardless of how the audition goes, I think a huge learning thing is to be respectful, kind, and leave the audition with them maybe wanting more than you gave them. Meaning, don't tell your whole life story. Don't over talk. Don't over try to impress. Just give them a taste of something and then leave. Because I feel like that's the power of a great audition, is somebody who you just saw something and you're like, oh, that was so interesting. Where did they go?
Right.
And then it's like that scratch you can't find, but you're like,
right,
and you're like,
because they want to see more.
I got to see that guy again.
Right.
What's
your audition? At least when you were auditioning in the 90s and you wanted to be an actor, did you take the sides, and did you always go in with an idea? I mean, the way you talk about it now, about wanting more, sounds like something you've learned over the years. But in the beginning, how much work would you do on those audition sides? And
I think it was a very common thing that you're focused on. What is it they're wanting? I want to give them what they want. And I think that's the big learning lesson, is if you approach your auditions that way, you're sort of outside your body and you're not really living the moments. You're just saying, is that right? Is this right? And it creates a very two-dimensional character. There's no depth to it. Depth, I guess would be the word. And the best auditions, and I learned this over the years, the best auditions I had are ones that I went in, I felt a click, like a moment of realness. And then once I left the audition, I honestly couldn't tell you what happened, because it was just a moment that was not pre-thought. It was not manipulated in any way. And then the other hard lesson is you do the best you can, you do that, you give it a moment of realness, and then you let it go. Because there is something to, I mean, without getting overly, it's not even spiritual. I think it's just that feeling that if you can let things go, that gives space for them to grow. But if you're, oh man, I screwed that up. Oh, if you're running the rest of your day going, I wonder, am I going to get a call? Right. It just sets up a really weird energy in your surroundings and in the audition room. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think talking to directors and actors, walking into an audition with desperation is a no-no. Like, it's people can feel it, feel the desperation, and they overcompensate and they overdo and they are, doing too much.
Right. Yeah, unless the character's desperate.
Right. Correct. Exactly.
But what I always say too is, whatever you're feeling the day of, say I feel, I'm just trying to find an example. Say I feel irritated from the subway ride to the audition. I mean, something really bad happened.
That could be every day, right?
Yeah, it could be. Rather than trying to get through that, if I'm not through it when it's my time to audition, rather than try to get rid of that, you use it.
Yep.
So you already have something real, an energy that's really happened, that you just allow to continue, and then you work it into you. And that's where preparation comes from. I think a great thing, and Hugh and I do this before every show, we run our first scene backstage, but we we do it in a spirit that has nothing to do with the show or nothing to do with the real scene. So it's really about whatever happens in the moment. It could be, that I'm disinterested in you, or that I'm bored or distracted, or maybe Harold Hill, I secretly love Marion the librarian, and Harold's in town, and I'm freaking out because look how gorgeous he looks, and look at me. And, it's those moments that you run the lines, and then once it's a real moment, you just carry that energy back onto the stage. And I think those things are hugely, especially when you do 8 shows a week.
Yeah. And it goes back to what you said about being playful.
Yes. Yeah. And trusting. If I trust the guy next to me that we can do that, we don't even speak. The first time I speak with you is when we're running the lines backstage. And it's great. It's the best part of somebody said, what will you miss most about the Music Man? I will miss everything backstage.
Oh,
and it's the connections you make I play games with the kids. I play games with Hugh, Remy, who plays Charlie Cowell. All the people that I enter with, we have this series of games we play right before we come on. That's, I think, is so. Then you don't even know you're on stage. I think that's what's the magic of theater, of live theater, is that connection you have in the moment with people.
Yeah.
You said a second ago, you said, not to get too spiritual.
Yeah.
However, my belief, my feeling about art is that it is a spiritual and it is an intimate experience. So it's kind of like you can't help but to.
It's absolutely spiritual. And I only meant that in terms of trying to define, for me, it's a spiritual experience, but it's that connection you have with something beyond yourself. And that's bigger than the moment that's happening. It's like, you guys know this, it's like when you're in the theater and those moments that may only happen a few times in the run of a show, but there are moments I call hollow moments where they're usually within silence. So something happens, there's a moment of silence, but there's a hollowness that's in the entire theater where it's a moment of absolute connection with 1,500 people breathing the same breath.
And you can feel that.
And you can feel it. You can't define, you just feel it. That's spiritual to me. That's what it is. And those are the moments you live for and you strive for, but they're the moments that you cannot manipulate into being. You just have to allow them to happen.
Exactly. Joy and I say this when she's certainly on stage much more than I am anymore, but that moment when you're sitting in a theater with 1,500 people and that the lights go down and the orchestra starts, for me, that is a spiritual feeling. It is another presence within, and sitting next to a stranger, or somebody that I don't know, but sometimes you make a connection there, and it's just an unbelievable feeling of sharing it with 1,000 or 1,500 people. It's it's a higher power of some kind.
I always say when those moments happen, when everybody's connected, the cast, the audience, the crew, like everything is happening, and that silence that you're talking about is there, and you just don't really remember exactly how it occurred, what really happened. My answer is God showed up.
Yes, that's it. That's it.
God, I don't know. We can't explain it. Let's not overthink it. Let's not talk about it. Let's just hope it happens again.
Right. That's it.
Yeah.
That is it.
So I want to talk a little bit about your growing up. You studied ballet and dance for years, and your mom was the founder and artistic director of the Georgia Ballet. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes.
And you went to the University of Georgia on a baseball scholarship. When did the switch to arts happen?
Well, in my house, sports and arts were happening at the same time. My mom was a ballet director. My dad was an All-American football player at Georgia Tech. So I grew up playing baseball, football, and basketball, and going from practice to partnering at the dance studio, really because there were no boy dancers who would, so they needed somebody strong enough to, lift the girls. And I found, and my mom was really ahead of her time in the fact that dance is a sport. You have to, and she would do a whole program that she would take to the high schools that would simulate ballet positions and ballet combinations with a specific sport, tennis, or and the kids would all come in and go, oh, I don't want to watch dance, and then they'd be like really like, oh my gosh, that's true, that's exactly what football is, or the baseball movement. And she did a lot of work, and that's really where I got my passion to give back, was through my mom and her dedication to seeing that sort of, I call it click moments, and that goes to Tennessee Williams, but that's the click of somebody drinking, like Rick going, I gotta have the click. But there's a click moment as an artist, or when you see somebody come into a giant theater for the first time and they're on stage and they look out at that audience and they go, click. It's like, oh, we got it. We got them.
Yeah.
They may not be actors for their life, but they're going to love the arts for the rest of their life, because that's though. And you see that in the teenagers that come in and are a part of something huge that they've never been able to be a part of in theater.
So what was your big click?
Mine was I would say it was when I was about 6, 7 years old. My mom created this ballet called Cherokee to Galaxies, and it was about the Cherokee Indians that populated the local area of Georgia where I'm from, and the opening of the brand new theater. It was I think it was the bicentennial year, 76, something like that. So there was all these celebrations going on, and she just had me. She put me in a scene where I was a frontier kid, and I had to go. It's very simple. I had to go over to this imaginary pond and put my feet in the pond, and in downstage center, of course. So you're like, ooh, yeah, and great light. And I remember the pool of light, and I remember walking up to the light as if I'm going to put and then I looked down and I said, oh, I had left my socks on from backstage. And it was just that moment of, well, what would I do? And so I took my socks off and did the whole thing and put them back on and went off. And that was a click. If that makes sense, that was a click moment.
Yeah.
Because it was a combination of being real in the moment, being in front of someone and feeling everyone sort of experiencing those simple moments together with giant pools of light and beautiful music and, what the theater can bring.
Wow. And doing something like what would I do is to take off my socks. Yeah, it's a simple thing like that, but can change your life.
Yeah. Who would have thought it?
As an advocate for arts education, what does that mean for you to make sure that young people are consistently being exposed to art?
Yeah, I'm involved at the Georgia High School Musical Theater Awards, which is at Artsbridge in Atlanta. And it's basically, for lack of a better description, it's sort of like the Georgia equivalent to the Tony Awards or the Jimmys here.
Yeah.
These are the national awards. And they're called the Shuler Awards, not because but because they wanted me to be a part of it. And they said, would you mind us calling in that? And I said, if I can lend my name to it, absolutely.
That's nice.
So I just can't express to people enough the importance of art in terms of just children's development, whether they end up being artists or not. In any profession, if you excel at it, you're an artist. You can't limit art to drama, singing, painting, playing an instrument, whatever, but there's an art to it. But they're all the same. It's all the same thing in terms of connecting to something that is super powerful and feeling what that is as a kid, as a teenager, and we started with 11 high schools the first year. This will be our 15th season. We'll have about 75 high schools from Georgia. And to see all these kids come together from all parts of the state and on a single stage and have those moments together. There's just nothing like, and to this day, there's not a week that goes by that I don't come out of the Winter Garden stage door that I hear, "Hey, Shuler, I was in 2009 Shuler Awards." I'm like, "Oh," and I said, "What are you doing now?" "Oh, I'm a lawyer, but man, we saw Music Man," and it's like, that's what it's all about. It's just a beautiful, powerful human connection. That's what art is. It crosses time. It crosses everything. You know, I can look at a Degas painting and just be there, like, wow. You know.
So obviously, when you're not, working on Broadway, like you're doing the Music Man or something else. You're currently the associate artistic director for City Springs Theater Company. What are some of the details that you do? Do you help set up the Shuler Awards? I mean,
now City Springs is a separate, and I'm actually I started as the associate artistic director, and now I'm actually the artistic director.
Okay.
But I have to say that title is just a title because, I agreed. Our executive director, Natalie Delancey, is the one that really keeps that theater company running. And I talk to her several times a week, and we set up new seasons. And my whole point was I want to take my experience as a working actor in New York and network local Georgia actors who maybe can't work or haven't been able to come up here. And I've brought directors and creatives down from New York. Would they have an opportunity to work with those kids and vice versa? And it's been like, that's really what has been something I've always wanted to be a part of, because I know just by being exposed to different levels of creativity that you become a better artist, whether you ever leave Atlanta or not. And I feel like because of that, the level of productions that we have has just skyrocketed. And it has a lot to do with just local talent being able to learn and be exposed to new ideas.
I know we had the website up just a second ago for information for people. So for people listening, that's artsbridgega.org.
That's the Shuler Awards. And Artsbridge is another arts institution in Georgia that does amazing work. Arts education, the Artsbridge GA and City Springs Theater Company also has an education wing, arts education wing under it, and provides performing opportunity for the kids, for teenagers and younger and all ages, really. Both groups do just an extraordinary amount of good work in introducing these kids to live theater. Live theater is, we talk about film and TV, and there's a reason movie stars like Hugh Jackman and TV stars like Sutton Foster, and you can see all the way. There's a reason why these actors keep coming back to live theater, and that is what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. Is that those moments of real connection? You can't recreate those. Those are unique moments that only really happen with live actors and live audience together. That's the recipe. You can't have one without the other. And that's what makes arts so It's hard to describe, but it's otherworldly. It's spiritual.
Yes.
And that's why I will always be a voice for supporting live art of any kind, where you have an audience, a group of people experiencing a situation together in real time. And that's magic.
And that's cityspringtheater.com.
Yes, correct.
The other thing I want to talk about is some of your off-Broadway work, which I think, you seem to are an actor that just doesn't take just anything.
Right.
You really, if you're going to do something, you're going to do something that's worth your time and worth your talent. The production of Sweet Charity that you did with Sutton, and although it was, directed by Lee, although it was, it was such an interesting take on Sweet Charity, and had so many metaphors, and you learned. I mean, I learned so much from watching that production, and your portrayal of Oscar was one that I'd never seen before. He was funny and heartbreaking, and I've seen so many actors play that part before, but your connection with her, like you talk about, is, again, you guys had that common language. You had that connection.
Right.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, it does come back to, I use the word trust, just because if I'm in those moments with Sutton and I trust her as an amazing artist and just as a friend and as somebody that we could just appear on stage and be in sync because we trust each other. But it's interesting you said that about Sweet Charity, about it was a lot of things that you'd never seen before in the production. And that's always been interesting to me in terms of really amazing written shows, musically and book and everything else. There's such depth. The reason they're so wonderful is there's a depth of opportunity in them, where you don't have to change a single word, you don't have to change a single note, you don't have to change anything other than how the intention behind what's being said, or what's happened just off stage, or the intangibles that aren't necessarily within the confines of the theater, of the stage we see. That's exciting to me, and I think that's I did Waiting for Godot and No Man's Land with Ian McKellen, Patrick Stewart, and Billy Crudup, the four of us. And Ian would talk about I'm blanking. Waiting for Godot. Who wrote Waiting for Godot? Just the writers of these shows would be asked, because Godot is
it Beckett?
Beckett. Yes, thank you. It's a perfect example of there's so many opportunities to present it in different ways, because there's a lot not known within the story we see. And somebody used to ask, "Oh, I finally figured out what it's about. I finally figured out who Godot is." And they'd go up to Beckett and they'd say, "Who is Godot?" And he would just say something like, "Yes." Yes. That's the whole point. It's up to you to create.
That's correct. Right.
And
so the answer was yes.
That to me is why a true revival of something isn't really a revival in terms of reviving the previous production. It's just a reinvention of the material that was given to that production. And I just find that incredible, because that allows new artists to put their stamp on something and use who they are within it.
And the actors to put their stamp on it too.
Yes,
I mean,
that's
you
it.
know, Neil Simon wrote that script and nothing was changed. I mean,
Yeah.
but so many of the intentions of what Charity goes through, of what she needs in a man and what she learns. I'd never seen that in a production of Sweet Charity before, and it blew me away.
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
It's funny. Real quick, I know we're
please go
running out of time, but a personal example of that was my Broadway debut. I played Javert in Les Mis, and I was on stage when 9/11 happened, playing Javert. And that was the last time we shut down Broadway, and everyone was like, "Oh, we missed 3 days." You know, little did we know our nice pandemic would happen. But I can remember the show coming back. There was, I don't know, a couple of hundred people in the audience. And I sing this song. We've all been through this horrific event, and I had my newborn baby in Central Park looking downtown, seeing the smoke, going, "What am I doing? What is it about being an actor on Broadway that means anything in this kind of environment?" I mean, seriously, it doesn't mean it. And then I'll never forget, the song Stars came on, and there's that beautiful boom, 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 boom. And then I started singing the lyrics, and the lyrics were, "There, out in the darkness, a fugitive running, fallen from grace." And it was like, it's like, I just felt like there was such a connection to what we all had just been through, just because of the power of lyrics and the power of music. And there was a real connection of it being timeless and being a different story, but nothing was changed. And I've told this story before, but when we finished that show, I would say most, if not all, the people who were in the audience came to the stage door.
Wow.
And they just said, "Thank you for giving us some place to go, some place to escape." And I was like, you know what? That's good enough for me.
That's it.
I can see how being a performer and the kind of performer you are brings you professional fulfillment and creative fulfillment. What brings you personal fulfillment?
I really think it's sharing, it's having passing the love of and the importance of live theater and art to the next generations. That's, I mean, people always say, leave the place better than you found it, you know? And I think there's such talent, and kids are so smart these days, but it's become more challenging with the advent of social media and the immediacy of something like online, you know, TikTok or whatever, that I think it's sort of cheated a lot of youngsters out of what they're missing when you take the time to go to a theater and be a part of something live together.
And put your phone down, right?
Yeah. And I really think, having talked to kids that come for the first time, and Hugh's great at this, he'll always ask, you know, we did the Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, and he would always start it by saying, who out there has never been to a Broadway show? And it's always, there's like tons of, because it's Hugh Jackman, you know, they came to see him.
Yeah.
But I would talk to them afterwards, and they were like, I had no idea. I had no idea
Wow.
how amazing this is. And that to me is encouraging, and it's infuriating. And it gives me a feeling of personal responsibility to get the word out to those people who just don't know better, because it's a real source of inspiration and connection.
Do you find that this upcoming generation of artists have a affinity or appreciation for the shoulders that they stand on, or is there like a different, because we all talk about, oh, the millennials are this way when it comes to business, or the blah blah blah. Are you seeing in the arts that there is a disconnect or a connection? What do you experience in the arts?
I feel like it's a combination of things. What I do notice is the kids today, through social media outlets, have evolved into some of the most amazing natural talent artists that I've ever seen. Like taking a child from the North Georgia mountains who'd never been to any live show, never seen anything on stage, and come into Georgia and nail a Broadway song like I've never heard before because they learned it on TikTok. That's awesome to me. That's awesome. But then the other side of that is, well, I want to be famous. If I can only get 300,000 followers, I've met, so there's both sides of that coin, that good and bad. But I do find that kids in general are open to learning. It's just, can we teach them? Can we give them, not, and I mean teaching by just giving them the opportunity to experience it for themselves. My grandfather was a superintendent of schools, and he always used to say I think it's the hallmark of an amazing teacher and an amazing parent, is that the goal should be, as a parent or teacher, to make you, the parent or teacher, obsolete. I taught them well enough that I can just no longer be needed in that sense.
Yes.
Well, they can go off and
Yes.
they can go off and do
and it's like
anything, right?
a voice teacher who teaches a technique. It's not, oh, I as an artist, I don't want to come back and go, oh, I got to go fix that next week. I got to feel like, you know what? You just gave me the gift, and now I go share it. And that's rare, but I think that's the magic, is if we can get to that. Because I think we underestimate each other too much.
I would agree. On a lighter note, Shuler, what do you like to do after? How do you unwind after a show? How do you?
You know what? I love riding. I walk or ride the subways. Well, first I'll usually just sit in my dressing room and just sort of chill and listen to. I have this. It's one of those little balls that creates the music, and it's like chosen just for you.
Yeah.
No, and I always love that, because I don't know what that's based on,
Right.
but it's always
it's always good.
From
Yeah,
opera to rap, and I never know what's going to come on, so it's kind of like fun to just say, just press that button, and it says, "Okay, this is chosen just for you," and it's like, what's going to happen? So, and then, but in the same sense, I like going from the theater back into the world, and subway rides are really interesting, especially if you're the one person in the subway car not on your cell phone.
Right.
It's amazing to just sit there and people watch. And this town, you know, I've been on and off in New York since 1987.
Yeah.
So this is the greatest city in the world for observing the world.
I completely agree. That's a great way to end it. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
thank you for teaching today. It's been an incredible.
No, you know, it's funny. I've learned as much as anybody about just having our conversations, and
yeah,
you get so sort of in your own world and in your own zone that you forget things, and you need to take a step back and sort of talk it out with people. So I really appreciate you guys.
I'm so glad that we got to do that.
Yeah,
I really am.
Yes, thank you for sharing yourself with us today.
Yeah, thank you for sharing yourself. I mean, I'm going to try to make it back to see Music Man one more time before it closes. So I can't wait. We had Warren on 2 weeks ago, and he's a friend, and he's like, yeah, you got to come back. You got to come back. You got to come back.
Warren was an ensemble member of that original Oklahoma.
Yes.
Jake. Jake. And his legs would go above parallel. Unbelievable.
And that is our show. I want to thank everyone for listening this year. Actually, we've had so many incredible guests, and I'm thrilled that you've been watching and listening to these incredible artists. We're taking some time off for the holidays, but our next show is January 9th. Please visit us at liveatthelortel.org, and we will announce our 2023 guests very soon. Happy holidays, everybody. See an off-Broadway show. Stay safe, and we'll see you next year at the theater. Good night, everybody, and thank you. Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Shuler. You are an extraordinary artist. Thank you. Good night.